Hari Om children. Now after learning the causes of the revolution, let us learn the events that finally led to the revolution. We have seen that the kings were absolute, there was no equality in the society, food shortages was there, and a new set of ideas of the philosophers was gaining popularity among the new middle classes. So the situation in France was now all set for a revolt or a revolution. A series of events began with the meeting of the Estates General on 5th May 1789. Louis XVI called together an assembly of the Estates General at the Palace of Versailles to pass proposals for new taxes. The first and second estate sent 300 representatives each, who were seated in rows facing each other on two sides, while the 600 plus members of the third estate had to stand at the back. The members of the third estate were the rich and the educated members. The peasants, artisans, and women were not allowed entry to the assembly. But these members had 40,000 letters with them in which the grievances of the poor peasants and workers was written. Voting in the Estates General in the past had been conducted according to the principle that each estate had one vote. This time also, Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice. One vote means the clergy had one vote, nobility had one, and the third estate one. What will happen if this practice was followed? The clergy and nobility would vote for the proposal, that is, they will agree for an increase of taxes, and only one vote of the third estate will be against the proposal. So the king would go for the majority and could increase the taxes. But this time, the members of the third estate, who were influenced by the ideas of the philosophers, demanded that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. The king rejected this proposal, and immediately the members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. The representatives of the third estate who walked out of the meeting of the Estates General viewed themselves as spokesmen of the whole French nation. On 20th June 1789, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles, and they declared themselves as a national assembly. The members of the National Assembly took an oath here, which is known as the famous tennis court oath. The oath was that they swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. The members of the National Assembly were led by Mirabeau and Hébésiès. Mirabeau was born in a noble family, but he was convinced of the need to do away with the society of feudal privileges. He brought out a journal and he had delivered powerful speeches to the people at Versailles. Hébésiès was originally a priest who wrote an influential pamphlet called What is the Third Estate? While the National Assembly was busy at Versailles drafting a constitution, the rest of France seethed with turmoil. A severe winter had meant a bad harvest. The price of bread increased, and bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. On the morning of 14th July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. About 7,000 men and women had gathered in front of the town hall and had decided to form a people's military. The king had commanded his troops to move into the city, and rumors spread that he would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. The angry citizens broke into a number of government buildings in search of arms. Finally, a group of several hundred people marched towards the eastern part of the city and stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille, where they hoped to find hoarded ammunitions or arms. In the armed fight that followed, the commander of the Bastille was killed and the prisoners were released. The Bastille was hated by all because it stood for the absolute power of the king. The fortress was demolished and its stone fragments were sold in the markets to all those who wished to keep a souvenir of its destruction. The days that followed saw more rioting both in Paris and countryside, and the people were protesting against the high price of bread. By the end of July and beginning of August, there were riots in the countryside. The angry peasants, they burnt the nobles' chateau, destroyed the documents which contained their feudal obligations, they looted the hoarded grains and burnt down all the documents. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. This is called the Great Fear. Faced with the power of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI now finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly, who was drafting a constitution. He accepted the principle that his powers would from now on, be checked by a constitution. On the night of 4th August 1789, the Assembly passed an order abolishing all feudal system of obligations and taxes. Members of the clergy were forced to give up their privileges, the tithe were abolished, and lands owned by the church was confiscated by the state. In one night, feudalism was destroyed in France. Now let us understand the feudal system of obligations or feudal dues. What is it? Feudalism is an economic system that existed in Europe during the 17th and 18th century. In this system, as you can see, the king is at the top, who provides money, recruits army on demand, and grants lands to his landlords. Below the king comes the lords and his vassals, who protect the king and manages the territory for the king, because the king does not pay them in cash, but he pays them in land. So all the land of the king is now under the protection of the vassals. Under the vassals comes the knights who protect, or the soldiers who protect both the king and the lords. To the last strata of this system comes the peasants, who were the majority in population. The peasants worked on the lands provided to them by the vassals. They had to pay taxes, which is called as the feudal dues. The people who suffered the most in this feudal system are the peasants, who paid a lot of taxes to the vassals as well as the king. The French Revolution brought an end to all these feudal system, that is feudal dues and feudal obligations. The National Assembly completed the draft of the French Constitution in 1791. The main objective was to limit the powers of the monarch, and the powers were separated to different institutions like the legislature, executive, and judiciary. Do you remember the philosopher who gave this idea? Yes, it is Montesquieu. A constitutional monarchy was now introduced in France, and the power to make laws was given to the National Assembly. How were the members of the National Assembly elected is mentioned in page 10 of your textbook. Just read it and find out. The citizens were also grouped into active citizens and passive citizens. Even that is mentioned. Find it out. Here you can see in this picture the law tablet and the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, with which the French Constitution begins. Just look at the symbols of the French Constitution. The majority of men and women in the 18th century could not read or write. So, images and symbols were frequently used instead of printed words to communicate important ideas. The painting by Le Barbier uses many such symbols to convey the content of the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. Just go through these political symbols, find out their meanings, and write it in your notebook. The broken chain, the bundle of rods, the eye within a triangle radiating light, the scepter, a snake biting its own tail to form a ring, a red cap, the winged woman, and the law tablet. Every political symbol had its own meaning. Find it out. Now in this presentation, we have seen that the events that led to the outbreak of the revolution. The revolution is not yet over. It just started on 14 July 1789 with the fall of Bastille. A series of events are now going to happen, which together is called as the French Revolution. About it, we'll learn in the next class. But before that, do a small activity. Make a feudal school poster. As we learnt feudalism, draw a triangle and on a blank sheet of paper, create a feudal system that represents our school. Think about who goes at the top of the school, the middle and the bottom. Draw images of each group and write a short sentence that explains their role in the school. The next question is, why did the members of the Third Estate walk out of the Estates General Meeting on 5th May 1789? You may write it in your own words. And find the difference between an active citizen and a passive citizen. What was the aim of the French Constitution of 1791 and what were the natural and inalienable rights granted by the French Constitution? All these answers are in your textbook. Read it and find the answers. Thank you, children.